Hey everyone, it's M.S.G, and today I'm going to be covering the balanced data slate. As of today, it's the 27th of April, 2024. The balanced data slate came out 2 days ago on the 25th. This video is just going to cover the winners and the losers of the previous balanced data slate, highlighting the ones that have benefited from it. Three, in my opinion, that have benefited the most and the least, as well as just models or units that I don't think you should still bring even after the data slate. So, how has it changed Chaos Space Marines? Overall, fantastic. I think that it's incredibly useful to have points cuts, judging from how badly we got shafted in the previous data slate with all the points increases, which brought us down to, in my opinion, quite a lot. I think it were a bit unnecessary, especially on one unit that I'm going to mention in future. Uh, yeah, all points increases from the previous data slate have now gone to all points decreases on units, which I'll be honest, but I did not expect some of the units to get a points cut, but I'm not going to complain. Chaos Space Marine win rate, according to Goonhammer at the moment, is 46.68%, which means that's roughly about 46.5. So it's sub 50. So Games Workshop have looked at that and gone, right, that's bad. Let's just randomly throw some nerfs and compensation their way. And yeah, I mean, like I said, all points cuts, not going to complain. The issue I do have, though, is I do think the balanced data slate is extremely lazy. I think the Chaos Knights got shafted because they need points cuts on the bigger knights because there's no reason to bring them now because the War Dogs literally just do what they do but better and for more cost efficient. Uh, Demons got no changes either, so there's a lot of other costed units like Demonettes, Bloodletters, they're still in there, but it's nice to not have any of them nerfed in terms of the big monsters. So, for example, uh, the Lord of Change is still really good. Scarbrand is still pretty much an auto include in a lot of corn lists. Bellicor didn't get any points cuts, but I do think he kind of needs one, to be fair. I think it's just. It's complicated, but I think that they've needed a few changes. But again, no change is better than bad change, I assume. Uh, a lot of lists now that you're going to see, which is great, are going to be more viable. So a lot of people have got, well, obviously, because it's all negative points cuts, you're going to have a lot more points to play with. You might be able to add an enhancement in a unit you previously bought. It's nice to see a lot more variety. People are wanting to experiment with a bit more units. So, for example, people are going to start bringing some weird and wacky combos. And it's just going to be great to see. This is a really good time to get into Chaos Space Marines for those who are considering it, because you can bring pretty much anything other than a very select few units and just test them out and see how you get on with them. Obviously, it depends on your local meta, but you know. So, how's the video going to work? So, I'm going to list a few runners up first. So, there's going to be two models that I believe have been benefiting from the changes, but I don't think have been benefiting enough. So they're not sufficient enough to be competitively viable, or just don't make enough impact within the whole index, or the meta in general to warrant any kind of mention other than that. Then I'm going to rank the top three winners and top three losers. So these are the most prominent models in the data slate that I believe were benefiting the most, and the top three that I believe have been ignored and or worse as a result of the data slate. Obviously, it's mainly in a sense to highlight them, to not only praise their achievements. So, for example, with the top three winners, it's nice to get a reason as to why they are the top three winners. And then for the top three losers, it's to highlight them from a place of love. So they get the care that they need. They need to get improvements. What would I improve about them? How would I improve them, etc. With that said, though, once that's done, I'm going to highlight it in a winner and loser style. So it's going to be winner, loser. That way, you're going to be more engaged with the video. So it'll switch it from a positive to a negative, and it's easier to follow. So you're not just getting a barrage of positive and then a barrage of negative. And we're not going to end the video on a dour note. We're going to end it on a positive note because it's good as a great time to be a Chaos Space Marines player, especially with the upcoming codex in the next few months. So, a few disclaimers. If they're on the losers list, it doesn't mean they're a bad unit. You don't need to be sat there condemning everybody. If they're on the losers list, this is my opinion. I don't think that they are a bad unit, and I'm going to specifically state if they're on the losers list, I don't think they're a bad unit. And if I do think they're a bad unit, I will elucidate as to why I think they're a bad unit. I'm not just going to leave you in the dark. And conversely, if they're on the winners list, it doesn't mean they're an auto include unit. Excuse me. unless I've stated otherwise. So again, relatively simple. Don't automatically assume because it's a winner that it's going to be, oh my god, I'm going to bring three every game and just destroy everybody. That's not how it works. So the points changes. The theory that a lot of people have, and the consensus is that because the codex is coming out soon and they're offering thematic detachments for each legion, they're going to focus more into the style of unit. So, for example, if you look at the general amount of points cuts we've had on the units which have been points cut, you will notice that there's a trend you could fit in with each legion. So, for example, I'm just going to do a little spoiler. Possessed, I've got a points cut. Obviously, that's for probably for the upcoming Word Bearers detachment or like Demonkin detachment, which won't surprise me. And Terminator's got a points cut, which is probably going to be for like a Black Legion or a like a Terminator brick detachment where you get extra rules if you're running Terminators in squads of blah blah blah. But again, that's just the way I view it, and a lot of people also view it. Uh, Finally, though, while we're on the disclaimers point, just before I forget, it's not in chronological order. If a unit is in the latter end of the video, it doesn't mean that it's worse or better than the unit that is at the start of the video. Obviously, the top three winners and losers are exempt from this rule, but I'm just laying that one down. If you see your favorite unit in the losers or winners category at the latter end of the video, don't be disheartened. I cover every unit that I think benefited and lost from this data slate. But with that said, grab a drink or a snack, sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. And for those wondering, the background art is Heaven's Edge. It's Guilty Gear Strive. Really, really fun to look at, and it's a great wallpaper for those who are interested. So the runner-up, first one is the Demon Prince without wings. He is 180 points as of the previous data slate, but now he's 165. Nice to see him get a points deduction, but again, I think his abilities are the main uh, dagger in his chest, for lack of a better word. That's going to keep him from achieving his full potential. So that it gives the benefit of cover for infantry within 6 inches, and it's completely useless in most circumstances. It doesn't do anything. Unless you're running up the board like a complete lunatic and just getting shot in the middle of nowhere, there's absolutely no point to do that when you can just bring the Mark of Nurgle stratagem and make them so you can't get shot. It's that easy. Then you also get the really weird ability, which is arguably better because it actually does something. Ascended Demon, which means that every time he shoots or fights, when resolving those attacks, you can re-roll a hit and a wound roll. Only a single one. Wow, that's actually really bad. Holy shit, that's really bad. Again, he's 165 points. He does hit hard. I mean, strength 8 minus 2, 3 damage. Pretty nice. Sweep attack's absolutely terrible, though. And he does get the benefit of having, if you bring him as Nurgle, he's toughness 11, which makes him very difficult to shift. And if you obviously Zinch, you get extra shots from your cannon. +2 to your strength if you corn, and Slanesh, you get +2 to your move, so your 10-inch move, which is not bad. It's probably it's just a weird unit. So I'm going to explain this very briefly, just to not bore you. But I think the problem lies in the internal balance as well as the external balance. So the Demon Prince itself, the stat line is actually good. So 8-inch move, toughness 10, 2 up armor, 4 up invul, 10 wounds. He's got a heavy bolter with 3 shots at strength 5 minus 1 2, and it hits hard, or relatively hard, on 2s, and he gets to re-roll a hit and a wound roll, which is, it's not the worst, but there are worse things. If you're running undivided, you're re-rolling ones to hit, and you can possibly re-roll all wounds when you're doing Prevail Zeal on this guy. But again, it's a bit, you're going to burn a CP on that, really. But anyway, he is meant to be the support variant of the winged version. So the winged version is more of a damage missile as opposed to this guy who's supposed to be the dude who's with the troops, pushing up with them on foot, which I understand. However, I do think he's just outclassed. So if you're wanting free strats, just bring a Chaos Lord. Fights first, Lucius on a blob of legionaries or chosen. Damaging, Noise Marines if you wanted to. I don't think Lucius can lead chosen. Damage increase, you just bring a Terminator sorcerer. You can pop -1 AP with Death Hex on a unit and just watch it get melted. Rerolls to hit or a 4-up invulnerable aura. You just bring a Baden. And damage, again, Winged Demon Prince. It does what he does better. Winged Demon Prince moves at at 12 inches, I believe. It's a toughness lower, but it hits is a lot more viable when it comes to engaging with people. But again, the problem is he's not going to get really any points deductions because at the end of the day, he's still a demon prince. He's still quite scary to deal with. A lot of units are going to look at him and go, "Oh dear." But any dedicated anti-tank fire is just going to blow him up, and he's quite slow, and he's a big profile. Not as big as the wing variant, but he's still pretty hard to miss, for lack of a better word. And yeah, other than that, I do think he just needs a bit more love. He needs better abilities as well because he just doesn't do anything. Benefit of cover is absolutely terrible. Second is the Mauler Fiend. So the Mauler Fiend has gone from 155 points to 140. He's nice. He's good in casual games. This guy, if you bring him in a casual game, bring one or two, you're going to have a good time. He's a fun unit to bring. He's not disgustingly overpowered. He's pretty well balanced, I think. He's fun. No one's going to complain about a Mauler Fiend. Let's put it that way, because they're a fair unit in my opinion. They've got. I mean, Siege Crawler's a good ability. Reroll advance and charge rolls and ignore all modifiers to its move characteristic and advance and charge rolls made for it, so it's going to get into combat. Even with the advance and charge on the Slanesh stratagem, that's surprisingly quite a decent threat range. But the problem is, it can get screened very well because it doesn't fly. So the weaknesses lie in the fact that one, yeah, it's toughness 10. It has a 5 up invul and a 3 up armor, and it's 12 wounds. It can get bracketed. Its melee damage is a bit questionable. Yeah, strength 14 is nice, but -2 is just a bit especially when you're dealing with tanks, and D6 plus 1 damage is actually fairly okay. But it's just the range. You're a threat in melee, and that's it. If your opponent can do well at either kiting you or keeping you at a distance, which again, kiting this guy is actually quite hard because 10-inch move and reroll advance and charge rolls, pretty decent to actually get into combat. But again, he's gonna get shot and he's gonna die. Your opponent's gonna see the big scary monster thing and just shoot it, and it's gonna just die to pretty much any decent anti-tank fire. I don't think you're going to see these guys in a competitive lists. I am a competitive list or any competitive list for that matter, simply due to the fact that it's outclassed by a lot of the other options that we have available. So, for example, the Predator is 130 points and it's a lot safer to use. It might not be as durable, but it can shoot from a mile away. It does a lot more damage from range, which is more beneficial, and you can pop the Nurgle strat on them because why not? And you don't get shot from 18 inches on a backline tank unit. Fantastic. In addition, Venom Crawlers are 30 points cheaper, not 20 points cheaper, because Venom Crawlers are now 110 points, and they just do the distraction kind effects job better. This guy, like I said, you want to run him up the board and you want to get into combat as soon as possible. But the problem with that is the Venom Crawlers are, I believe, just better. Like they've got range, for example, they've got what is it, 6 shots? No, 12 shots each. They're considerably cheaper if you bring them in three, so 330 for 3 Venom Crawlers and 420 for the Morphines if you bring them. So do the math. It's 90 points extra for an objectively worse trio of units. I wouldn't bring them. If I was to make them better, I would probably maybe I don't know. I think internally balanced, you want to pay a bit extra for a arguably better in melee threat because this guy in melee is going to do a lot more damage than a Venom Crawler on average. But I think the Venom Crawler is more utility, and the Mauler Fiend is very maxed into me run at you, me punch you, which your opponent is going to know how to deal with. Whereas with a Venom Crawler, 36-inch range threat with, granted, it's not the best shooting profile, but there's that many shots coming through, it's going to do some damage. But yeah, Mauler Fiends are still. I still like Mauler Fiends. I still quite like them. I think they're a pretty fun unit to use, but I don't think you'll see them in competitive lists or tournaments. But I am more than happy to be proven wrong. With that said, let's get on to the top 3 winners. So, biggest winner, Legionaries. You obviously saw this one coming. These guys are phenomenally good now. I initially ranked them, I believe it was an 8.5 in my part 3 of the Chaos Space Marines guide, which I recommend you watch, by the way, if you're looking to get a bit more analysis on the actual unit, how to run them, what loadouts you need to bring if you wanted to bring a ranged or melee one, how do you play them, etc. Please check out that video if you haven't already, or if you're interested, because like I said, it's nice to engage with people, and the video gets a lot more reach, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, I'm trying to help out a lot more people. I do this for fun, I don't do it for money. So the previous points cost that they had were 90 for 5. They are now 80 for 5, which is really good. So 160 points for a squad of 10 for the optimal melee loadout, which is all chain swords bar the two heavy melee weapons. So you've got two heavy melee weapons and 8 chain swords, re-rolling wounds, re-rolling ones to wound on off the objective, and on the objective it's re-rolling all wounds, exploding fives to hit in melee due to the Marcus Lanesh, re-rolling advance and charge with the unnatural swiftness for their command point. Throw them on mid board. These guys are going to do a lot of damage for what they cost. In my opinion, as well, they've also found the niche. So, for example, the trifecta of infantry. There's the cultists, which are the cheap, disposable ones, which you need in a pinch. Legionaries are the home brand stuff, if in my opinion. They're like you pay a bit extra, you get a bit extra for it, like you're paying for a bit extra quality, whereas chosen are the premium uh, infantry for points cost. In my opinion, I think these chosen are still quite nasty. However, I do think that the chosen are still overcosted, which I'll get onto later, but again, this is for legionaries. So 10 cultists are now 50 points, legionaries of 10 are 160, and a unit of 5 chosen is 130. 160 points for 10 legionaries or 5 chosen for 130 points. Legionaries are genuinely, arguably, the best points value. Cultists becoming a very close second. I do think the legionaries are really well priced now. They're a cheap 2 OC melee oriented unit which wants to contest objectives, can shoot if needed, and is capable of doing a lot of damage via their dart packs. It's a no-brainer, so you're probably going to see these well, you're not probably, you are going to see these in a lot of competitive lists because of the sheer fact that they're so cheap for what they give you. I'd bring at least 10, so you can either do that in 5 to 2 5 squads or one squad of 10. You might be warranted to bring even more, to be honest with you. You genuinely, no one's going to complain at that. 320 points for 20 is really, really good. Yeah, with that said, I think these guys are probably the biggest winner. I think they're fantastic. The biggest loser, this is more of a systemic problem, not specifically with a model, but it's the accursed cultist. So there's still 105 points for the minimum amount, which is quite frankly ridiculous. The previous update ruined the rules and the points cost. So their rules got changed, so they're now 1 OC each, and they can only regen wounds and models if they are in models if they are with your command phase. If you're in your command phase, they can't regenerate them in your opponent's command phase anymore, which again, I get, because having them constantly regenerate is a bit of a pain in the ass and it's not really fun to go against, but they got gutted, basically. You either change the rules and leave the points, or change the points and leave the rules. You want to pay for the OP good abilities, that's fine, you pay for them. But you don't make it so you are paying more for an objectively worse unit. It's like shrinkflation. You're paying more and getting less, essentially. It just doesn't make sense. But they need to have the change reverted, or they need to keep that change and have a points cut to deduct from their overall cost to make it applicable for them. So you need to either, like I said, keep the rule. If you want to keep them nerfed like that, that's fine. I understand. Deduct the points cost. Or if you want to keep them strong, that's fine. It's nice to have a premium unit. Make them cost a premium then. That's the point. You pay extra to get better abilities or a better unit. I feel like they're so close to being even viable. I think they're so close to being still brought. But the recent balance data slate, not the most recent, this one, the previous one 3 months ago, it just shafted them completely. It were totally unwarranted. I still believe they're quite good. So the whole cultists and Dark Commune run up the board, advance and charge, +1 to wound and hit in melee is actually pretty fucking nasty still. But they're just too expensive. If you need a backline objective, just regular human cultists are going to do that better. It's nice to have them regenerating, but you're paying 105 points for a regenerating model when you can legitimately bring 2 cultist squads for cheaper, or a squad of 20 cultists. I don't think you can bring 20 cultists. Actually, I'm not actually sure about that one. But yeah, legionaries just are better in the mid board, and they are a lot more applicable now, especially with the reroll ones to wound and the reroll objective aura. The reroll wounds on objective aura, which is nice. but they're outclassed. Unfortunately, they're too expensive and they're outclassed for what they bring, which sucks because the Cursed Cultists are a really, really cool model, and I would like to see them more often. Second biggest winner is the Vindicator. So they were originally 190, they're now 175. This thing hits like a fucking truck. They have been on the verge of being really competitive for a very long time, and I think this minus 25 point, sorry, minus 15 points cut is definitely good. You're going to see these a lot more. So they are 25 points cheaper than a Forge Fiend now, but there are pros and cons to bringing each, so I'll explain that later on, but I'll just get onto the pros of this guy. So he's very well priced. Strength 14 on his Demolisher Cannon means you're wounding a lot of T11, 12, and 13 stuff on threes, which is great. A lot of like tough vehicles are going to be wounded on threes instead of fours or fives now. T7 units, so like for example your Alaris Terminators, any like super heavy infantry, light vehicles, etc., are going to get wounded on twos, which is great. And the minus 3 AP forces them to either an invul save or doesn't forces them to either a 5-up invul or 4-up invul or a 6-up armor save or a 5-up armor save, depending on what you're shooting at, which is great. So you can run them as Marker, Zinch, or Nurgle. Zinch is okay, but I think Marker Nurgle is great, mainly mathematically, because Strength 14, if you wounded anything on a 2 or a 3, you usually want to run the sustained hits one, but if you're running on fours, you can kind of switch it up. You can get more bang for your buck if you want to wound on fours because it's a 50% chance. But if you wounded anything on a 5 or a 6, you want to run lethals. I run this guy usually in Tabletop Simulator with the Mark of Nurgle because obviously D6 plus 3 shots with Blast, you can get potentially even more, which is great if you don't roll too well on the D6, or alternatively, you can roll well on the D6 and you get quite a lot more. Either way, it's nice. And if you feel your opponent's going to target him, just pop the Nurgle strat for a command point and you get this guy into a good spot. He's T11 as well, which is nice. So a lot of tanks that we have access to are toughness 10, I believe. Like the Predator's toughness 10, the Defiler's toughness 10 as well. But this guy's toughness 11, which is nice. A lot of strength 10 weapons are going to bounce off this thing basically, which is good. And it has a 2-up armor save. Fantastic. The problem is though, D6 damage. It should be D6 plus 1, in my opinion, because obviously, like, I understand because strength 14, you're wounding a lot easier, but whether or not you do enough damage is again the point of contention. D6, you can just roll a 1 on like 3 of them, and you've gimped your damage output by like 70% a majority of the time. Whereas sometimes you can roll 3 and you get 18 or 17, and you will just destroy anything you touch. Again, it's very swingy, but I still think these guys are really strong. Siege Shield is great. So if you're a tar-pitted, your opponent's like, oh, I'm just going to shoot, charge a unit of cannon fodder into you just so you get -1 to hit. Congratulations, that does nothing now. You can still hit on threes if you're caught in combat, and I think if you're shooting out of combat, you don't shoot at -1 to hit as well. You still hit on threes, so you're always hitting on threes, which is wonderful. So they're 25 points cheaper than a Forge Fiend. The benefits to running these guys over the Forge Fiend is obviously Strength 14, fantastic. That is a massively useful breakpoint. If you roll hot, you can roll quite a lot of damage. And again, if you roll hot, which is asking the dice to do the job, which is, again, you don't want to do that. Toughness 11, so it's tougher than the Forge Fiend. It has a better armor save than the Forge Fiend, but it doesn't have an invul, whereas the Forge Fiend does. It has 1 extra wound as well, and its rule is it's okay. It's not the worst rule. Siege Shield is nice. It's nice to have. But the Forge Fiend is 200 points. It's Strength 10 -3 damage, Dev Wounds, Dark Pacting, 3d3 shots on the Ectoplasma Cannons at 36-inch range. So the Forge Fiend has extra range over the Vindicator. It's got an extra 12 inches, which is considerable. And if it goes through, the Dev Wounds are quite nasty still. It's 3 damage Dev Wounds. Like, it's still a nasty model to get into, getting shot by at least. But ultimately, I would say if you want to bring a Forge Fiend, you can still bring Forge Fiends. I still think they're good, but I do think you are going to see this guy, the Vindicator, a lot more, mainly due to the fact that it's cheaper by 25 points. That on top of everything else, is going to make it so you are going to get a points deduction in a lot of lists, so you can bring even more units or consider bringing a different unit than you normally bring based on the fact that this guy got a considerable points cut. But again, it's pros and cons. The -3 damage is nice, but the strength 14 and -3 is nice as well. But again, it's dealer's choice. I think you're going to see Vindicators a lot more though. So the biggest loser is the Helldrake. As you can see, when I was typing this, I was a bit flustered. They are 205 points each, and they're still too expensive. They're way too expensive. 205 points for a unit that is basically just going to get shot immediately turn one. Toughness 9, 3 up armor, 5 up invul, 12 wounds, bracket. It dies immediately. Yeah, you can't really like deal with it because you can't screen it because it's it's a fly unit, but you it's just really, really, really weird. Like the flyers in this edition, it genuinely feels like Games Workshop. Like I said here, Games Workshop seems to be adamant on ruining flyers. I don't think there's a single flyer other than a very a very set few amount that are actually viable. And this guy is definitely not one of them. He's too big. He gets shot off the board almost immediately. You're paying 205 points for this guy. You can just bring a Forge Fiend. You can bring Obliterators. You can bring a Predator. You can bring a Vindicator. It's just there's far better versions of this guy that do what he does better. Like granted, yeah, anti-fly +2 and dev wounds in melee and +1 to hit if you're attacking a fly, so you're hitting on twos, not threes with dart packs, advance and charge if you're running it with Slanesh, it's nasty. But again, the flame is really nasty as well. Strength 6 -1/2 damage is pretty good. And D6 +3 shots. Again though, this thing's gonna die unless, like I said, unless your opponent has pity on you for bringing a Helldrake, it's gonna get shot turn one and die. This guy needs a points cut and a rules change. But, Games Workshop aren't gonna do that. Third winner is the third biggest winner, sorry, is the Chaos Bikers. So these guys have gone from 85 to 75 for 3, which is great. They're extremely efficient. They're 9 wounds on a T5 chassis, which is a very fast skirmishing unit that can redeploy and is fairly durable for the points cost. I definitely believe that you'll see at least one or two squads of 3 in a decent amount of lists, mainly because the Red Corsairs detachment rules are coming up fairly soon within the new codex, which is going to be nice. Hopefully, they get a lot of love. They're probably like I said, they're one of the biggest benefits to benefit from the recent points changes. Their ability, the outmaneuver ability, is great for doing secondaries. So you can do engage, capture enemy, engage on all fronts, capture enemy outpost or attempting target. Again, they're a utility unit which can actually deal quite a decent chunk of damage because you can bring the power fist on the champion, the guy in the charge of the squad, and you can bring chain swords or melter guns or plasma guns on these guys. So they hit decently hard. They're an annoying skirmisher unit. Your opponent has to consider dealing with them. And they're actually pretty nasty. I've used them in my own games before, and obviously you can tie them up. Like I said at the bottom here, they're great at dealing with all-purpose threats when it comes to other skirmishing units, but don't expect them to do like massive damage to like a tank or a terminators or something like that. But due to the oval bases, you can pretty much tag quite a lot of infantry or other models in combat and make it difficult for him to move. So if you tag someone from behind and you pincer move them, they can't fall back. They have to fall back through your unit, and then they have to take a desperate escape test as a result of that. Or you can tag, like in one of my games that I had with my best friend, he had two Myphitic Light Haulers next to each other. They were separate, so they were each a separate unit. Tagged them both with one unit, these guys, and kept them in one side at board so they couldn't move up for a turn and a half. And then I ended up taking a objective under the noses, and there's nothing we could do about it. These guys are really, really good. You will definitely see them a lot more. Chaos Bikers, they need a model update, in my opinion, but other than that, I actually think they're a really, really useful unit. And yeah, it's nice to see them on the board. It's nice to get some bikers there. So the third biggest loser, they could probably saw this one coming, the Lord Discordant. This guy is still 190 points, and he needs a rework. I think he doesn't need a massive points cut unless the new detachment rules for like demon engines and stuff give him some better rules. I do not ever think this guy's ever going to get brought in any list because he is absolutely terrible. He's just it sucks because obviously back in ninth edition it was a boogeyman, like the guy just turned up and just shredded you. Like you have to check both ways before crossing the road in case you got ran over by a Lord Discordant on Hellstalker with a Black Rune of Damnation and just melting you. So again, too easy to kill. Toughness 9, 5 up pinball, 2 up armor, easy to chew through, and especially given his size, he's very difficult to hide and obscure unless you use Nurgle Strat. But again, why are you using Nurgle Strat on a guy who kind of clearly wants to be in melee? And his damage is pretty bad. So the Bale Flamer again is nice. It's strength 6 minus 1 2 damage, G6 plus 3. 12-inch range and ignores cover, so you're killing Space Marines with any failed saving throws that they get on a 50% chance because it's a 4 up. It's just really bad. Strength 6 melee is really bad. Even if it's plus 1 to wound, it's really bad. And it's just, his abilities are just garbage. Like, this dude, just avoid playing this guy for the time being. He's been trash since 10th edition came out, and I think he'll continue to be trash because Games Workshop are not going to change him. He's still going to be absolutely terrible. And he gives up Assassinate as well because he's a character. So good luck. Nice one. Excellent work. Thank you, Games Workshop. So, to the winners and losers. Venom Crawler. Originally was 120, now it's 110. They're a fast, decently kill-oriented unit at 110 points, which is a fantastic change. For that, you're paying 110 points for a 12-inch move, toughness 9, 3 up armor save, 5 up invul unit. That's got 12 shots, minus 1 AP at strength 6, 2 damage each. Hitting on 3s and sustained hits on a 5 up with Markle of Nurgle. Mark of Nurgle is nice. You can bring it with Marker's Inch on a 5 up for the lethals in case you want to do that as well. And you also get the heal if you want to spend the command point on that. But again, I recommend you don't do that for the stratagem at least. You can genuinely bring him a Zinch though for the lethals. It genuinely doesn't matter. But a majority of the time I bring them with Nurgle because, big amount of dice equals kill. They are a cheap distraction card effects with the added snowball potential. So their ability means that if they kill or deliver the killing blow on a unit, then they get +1 to their melee and +2 to their shooting. So the way it works is obviously for those who are unaware, the thing has 2 excruciator cannons. So obviously you get +1 to each of its weapons because you've got 2, you get +2. So instead of going from 12 shots, you get 14. Instead of going from 6 attacks, you get 7 because obviously there's only 1 melee profile. But these guys can potentially, the +2 shots is nice. You're not going to complain because it's just going to shred chaff infantry pretty well. So if you put these against Gene Stealer cults or any kind of like infantry heavy respawning chaff, like army for example, like guardsmen, you will blend anything. They're also a 12-inch move as well, which is great. So if you want to rush these guys up turn 1 and just put them in points where your opponent can't rapid ingress or he struggles to rapid ingress, fantastic to deal with. They're a pain in the butt for your opponent to handle most of the time because the T9, unless they're going to focus all their anti-tank fire on it, but again, who cares? Like I said, they're not too durable, but they can cause a lot of problems for your opponent. If they die, they soak up some anti-tank fire, which would have gone into arguably more important units. You genuinely will see these guys, I think, because you'll bring at least 2 to 3 every game, run them up the board. For 330 points, you're going to run them up a board, and you're just going to, who cares what they do? They'll just go up, kill stuff. They might die, who cares? And by the time they're dead or they've killed everything in the way, then you're pretty much going to either win at that point or your army's moved up to a point where you're enabled to engage in a more positive way. Would I bring him? Yeah, 100%. I think these guys are great, and you're going to know that in my part 4 when I eventually get around to doing that. So, loser, Felgor Beastmen. These guys are a unit that I have wanted to be good for a very long time. They are the only unit in our codex/index that has the scout keyword, which is the pre-game 6-inch move, which is nice. We do need a bit more units with variety like that. I think it's nice to have that. I understand thematically, Chaos really doesn't utilize it because Chaos is stereotypically either a big shooty army or a melee army. They're not very renowned for scouting in lore because spiky boys. Excuse me, but it's nice to have that rule available for pre-game moves and screening and such. But they're too expensive for what you get. 6-inch move T4. You get +2 to charge rolls made for the charge if you target in a unit that is on an objective, which is actually quite nice. It's a really, really strong roll, that, I'll be honest. But they're hitting on 4s in melee. They're probably going to get -1 as well. And if you're hitting with a great weapon, you're hitting on 5s with 2 attacks, which is terrible. They do have grenades, so you can use the grenade stratagem. The shooting is absolutely terrible. I think these guys need a points cut. I think I'd bring them down to about maybe 70, 75. I genuinely do think that these guys are just trash at the minute, and it sucks because I really, really want to have a scouts unit that's actually viable. But again, they're just outclassed by other units in scout armies, mainly due to the virtue of their range. So, for example, Space Marine scouts, any other scout units that are better in melee. So, for example, the Lord Invocatus, he gets the pre-game move. Uh, just anything really. They're a cheap chaff unit that are a scout unit, and they're outclassed. But I would reduce them to about 70 to 75 points for a unit. I think that would be a really, really nice spot for them to be in. So Terminators, a lot of people don't like Terminators. I really love them. I think they're great, but they've gone from 195 points to 185 points for 5. So that would bring up the unit from, instead of 390, which is what I usually pay, they're now 370 for a unit of 10. Really good. I think these guys are going to be brought still. I think Terminators still have a purpose, especially now with a points cut. It's a good quality of life change. But again, other units getting increased and other units being decreased, it does threaten the viability, but I still think Terminators are still good. You'll probably see like a squad maybe of 5 or 10, depending. But again, I still think they're a really good unit. They still hit decently hard at range because obviously, combi bolt spam. They synergize very well with the leaders, especially the Sorcerer. The Sorcerer with Marcus Lanesh and these guys are just quite frankly ridiculous. They do so much damage. And they hit stupidly hard in melee because they get 2 chain fists. So you get an insane amount of bolter shots and 2 Reaper auto cannons and flamers, which is nice. However, in melee, you get 6 power fists, 2 chain fists, and uh, you know, Lady's Choice after that. But they're the big ones. So you get sustained hits on 5s, innate rerolls to hit thanks to your Despoiler's ability. Just fish for 5s on the Power Fist, and you basically just punch the shit out of anything that's in the way. You got 18 attacks, which are probably going to reroll all the hits for, and then get extra hits. So you're averaging about between 20 to 24 Power Fist attacks, and then you get the Chain Fist attacks, which is 6, but you're probably going to get about 8 on average, maybe a bit more. Again, it depends on the look of the dice, but they are very nasty to deal with, and they can kill quite a lot of stuff. The problem is, though, Terminators are so scary that a lot of people know how to deal with them. So they'll either feed them trash units or they will just immediately just avoid them with faster units. So in order to play them efficiently, they'll obviously, the big issue you're dealing with is you need to acknowledge the fact that they are going to get kited or ignored. So they'll drop down, do damage, maybe get into combat. The advance and charge rerolls on the Sorcerer is nice as well, but again, you're paying extra for the Sorcerer, and it's quite expensive. So now it'd be around 400 and I think they're 90 points for the Sorcerer. So it's 90 plus 170, which is it's 440 basically. I think my math is terrible. I'm not going to count that though. But again, it's my point is that it's very expensive for a re-roll in advance and charge rolls. But you do get advance and charge if you run them as Slanesh. So in another turn, if your opponent tries to run, roll a 6, advance charge, re-roll advance, re-roll charges, you're in probably. But again, it's still a lot of investment that your opponent can ignore. But if you do want to get better, because obviously the predictable nature of Terminators is that you run them as a 10-man squad and put them in the mid-board and just never move. And if your opponent sees that coming, they're going to preemptively put units in the middle of the board to stop you from doing that. And if you wanted to get better, Dave or Dean, I forgot his name, from Blog for the Blood God, he is probably one of the best Chaos Space Marine players I've ever seen. He does a Terminators Masterclass video. I recommend highly that you watch that. It's worth it. But the points cost, like I mentioned before, they've probably been deducted because there's a detachment rule coming in, which is nice. Yeah, not else I can really say. I think Terminators are really good still. Another loser is Vashtor the Archfane. He is still 190 points. No points changes. Why is he not cheaper? Yeah, I understand he's a big character and I get it, but he's still too expensive. He does not need to be 190 points. He is easy to kill. 2 up armor, 4 up invul, toughness 9. Not a bad defensive profile, but I'm not optimistic with how they're going to deal with him, to be honest, because obviously he's going to get his own detachment. I think it's like Cogs of Vashtar, I think it's called, or the Servants of Vashtar, or something like that. And it's just, it's not worth it. Like, it's just at the minute, he's too expensive. He dies immediately. His abilities are, they're okay. They're like a 4 out of 10. I think they're not the worst, but they're not like, game changingly strong. It's just not good. Like, yeah, he has deep strike, but again, if you're deep striking this guy, then you're not going to keep him next to your vehicles, which is where he kind of wants to be with the auras. Or he can be next to enemy vehicle. It's just a weird model. Like, he doesn't know what he wants to be. His melee is pretty pants as well at AP1. That's absolutely disgusting. But again, yeah, anti-vehicle plus 4 dev wounds. Yeah, that's nice, but who cares? And he's undivided too, I think. I know he doesn't have a mark, does he? No, he doesn't have a mark. Huh. Well, that's weird. Yeah, so don't bring him. Havocs. So these are a personal favourite of mine. I do bring these in pretty much every single game that I have, mainly because I love the whole big dude with heavy weapons thing. Uh, they are now 120 points. They were originally 135. I think they're a lot better priced now because now you're paying 30 points per last cannon shot. Because obviously the sergeant can't wield the last cannon, so you only get 4. So yeah, you can run them as heavy bolter, auto cannon, or chain cannon. I personally run them with las cannons, and in my experience, yeah, they can sometimes, you know, have a bro moment, for lack of a better word, and they will just do nothing and die or kill the Sens on the leadership test. But again, that's the risk of dart pacting. But the benefits most of the time outweigh the cons. So I do think that their ability, the stabilization talons, is really strong as well. You're always hitting on threes. It's probably one of the best abilities in the game, in my opinion, just for sheer reliability, because of the fact that you're pretty much always hitting on twos or threes, and yeah, you can get rerolls to hit with a Baden if you put them next to them. -1 to hit on low shot, high strength weapons can massively alter the damage output due to the scarcity of the shots. You're going to feel it a lot more if you miss. But obviously, the Havocs ignore that and they hit on the threes, hit on threes, and a lot of the time you are going to run them with Nurgle, so you get the plus 5 ups, give you sustained hits instead, and you are more likely hitting an extra shot and getting getting 1 or 2 extra shots and hitting all the other shots if you stood them next to a Baden. So you do quite a lot of damage. Obviously, a Baden is a contentious topic, but like when I don't think you'll see a Baden a lot either, but he's still really good. Back onto the Havocs though, D6 plus 1 damage is somewhat unreliable. It's not as unreliable as the cannon from the Demolisher cannon from the Vindicator, which is just D6. So the plus 1 is always nice, but again, these guys are your heavy weapons dudes. They want to do a lot more than swingy D6 plus 1 damage. Sometimes you'll do a lot of damage. Sometimes you'll do none. Again, luck of the draw. It's a dice game. But I do think that while they don't hit as hard as obliterators, they're a lot safer to use. So the 48-inch range means that you can perch them up on a piece of cover somewhere or terrain, or put them at the back of the board, line up a perimeter on the side of the map or something. Anything that runs into that line of sight is going to get hit with a las cannon, unless they've got like a stratagem to stop that, for like the Nurgle strat, for example. Unless they can do that, but again, your Havocs will more than likely hit everything that comes into that area. There is a negative I do have for Havocs, unfortunately, which means that once they've been a dedicated anti-tank unit, once the tanks have either been blown up or crippled to a point where they are useless, you will drastically see the Havoc's usefulness go down. They're very symbiotic when it comes to, if your opponent's running loads of vehicles, these guys are fantastic. I think these are wonderful. But as soon as those vehicles die, for example, if you kill like a Lehman Russ battle tank, you'll notice that their damage output is pants because you're shooting las cannons into like guardsmen, which is just incredibly inefficient. But again, I'd rather suffer from success than just suffer from just being middling an average, but I still think Havocs are pretty nice though. You might see one or two squads. I personally bring them every game though. The Defiler, my beautiful bladed whatever it is bug boy. Uh, he's 190 points still, far too expensive. He needed a points cut or a rules update, in my opinion. Yes, Scotland Walker's nice, like I've mentioned here, but it needs something else to give it that little edge to make him competitively viable. That and the fact that his movement and his measuring for his movement is a pain in the arse because he doesn't have a base, he just has the actual, just the legs. Really, really annoying to deal with. But again, I love the Defiler, I think he's great. He's really fun to play and he can put a lot of work in if you roll well. Obviously, the Defiler Cannon's D6 plus 3, 48-inch range, strength 10, minus 1, 3 damage. Pretty nice. Like it does a chunk of damage. You can get the Twin Heavy Bolter or Flamer as well. Alternatively, you can bring a Las Cannon or an Auto Cannon. I personally bring the Las Cannon for the strength 12, minus 3, D6 plus 1, re-rolling wounds. It is only one shot though, but you do run this guy Mark and Nurgle just so you can run him up the board. And, you can probably run this guy with Marcus Lanesh if you wanted to. Advance and charge. I mean, he is only 8-inch movement, but it's just advance and charge, and you do a quite frankly ridiculous amount of damage in melee. Strength 16, minus 3, d6 plus 1, 5 attacks. If you want to bring the Scourge, which again, if you're running a melee missile, there are better options, but this guy is quite fun. He's only T10, 14 wounds and a 5 up invul. It's somewhat tanky, I'm not going to lie. He does bracket at 5 wounds, but you can burn through it if your opponent focuses him down. And when you notice that he's gone, you will notice a lot of firepower has gone with him. You can burn the Nurgle strat every round if you want to on him, but again, you usually sometimes want to save command points for future rerolls, potentially using other stratagems that could potentially win your game instead of having to band-aid fix this guy consistently. Another problem he suffers from is that he's outclassed by other options. So why would I want to bring 190 points for a Defiler when I can spend 180 on two Obliterators, which are better on average, or a tank, Predator variant, or a Vindicator tank, or a Forge Fiend if I want to pay a bit, 10 points extra. It's just there are other options that outclass what he does better. But again, he's still fun to play. Like casual games, just definitely bring him. Possessed. A lot of people really like these guys. I am on the fence about them, but again, I still think they're good though. So they're 140 points now. They were 140 points. Sorry, they're now 130. So you've got a 9-inch move, toughness 6, 3 wounds, 3 up armor, and 5 up invul. Profile on a guy that has got 4 attacks, hit on 3, strength 5, minus 1 AP, which is pretty pants, and 2 damage each. And you get dev wounds when you dart pack, which is just it's really really good for what you pay for. You pay 260 points, you get 10 of them, and you just run them up the board and cause a lot of problems. They have quite a high damage in melee, so the dev wounds on dart packs is really good, especially if you're somehow able to get reroll wounds with the undivided and profane zeal stratagem. You can punch up a lot more with that combo, mainly due to the fact that the dev wounds allows you to pretty much override tanks or armor saves and vulnerable saves in general, and allows you to get that sweet 2 damage because obviously it's based on the damage characteristic. Alternatively, you can run him as Slanesh for the advance and charge and exploding 5s in melee. But again, it's dealer's choice. You can pick whichever you prefer. Some people say Undivided's better, other people say Slanesh is better. I am personally in the Slanesh camp, but I think that genuinely Undivided, on average, will deal more damage to heavier vehicles and heavier units. Obviously, the dev wounds is really nice, and if you roll really well with the Slanesh one, obviously, again, if you do more damage to infantry and other skirmishing units, so again, it's up to you. But you do get quite frankly, a ridiculous amount of attacks. Like I said here, 20 attacks for 5 models. You're going to blend hordes. You can pretty much reliably tear through Space Marines. So again, if they want to get AP -1 on anything, they're going to pop Armor Contempt, which means that they're saving on 3s. But again, you're throwing that many attacks. Some of them are going to go through, especially if you're running on sustained hits on 5s. You are going to throw a shitload of attacks out, and you can't save them all. You're going to get hit, and every hit that goes through, dead Space Marine. Nice. It's just good to have. The AP -1's a bit though. Like, it's just, don't rely on it. Let's put it that way. Uh, Do I think you'll see him competitively? Yeah, I think you do. I think you, especially with the new detachment that's probably going to come out with these guys, like a demon kin detachment. Like I said earlier, these guys are going to be definitely a prominent threat. The possessed bombs might be back, so you're paying 260 points for 10. Run them up board, cause some problems. Again, like I said, possessed and demon detachment, word bearer themes to look forward to. So they'll get extra rules, hopefully, which means they're going to be a lot better than they are now, hopefully. So fingers crossed. So possessed players, hope you're having a great time because you guys are going to enjoy dealing with. Oh, your opponent's definitely going to enjoy dealing with you now, which is great. Loser, Harken World Claimer. This guy is distinctly unremarkable, and I'll be honest, I forgot he existed at some point. I had to look through the index to find him. He's still 90 points, which in my opinion is too expensive. Yeah, he's 12-inch move, but he's toughness 4, 4 pinball, 5 wounds, which is actually quite nice. But again, it's just it doesn't do anything. Like yeah, mortal wounds on charge is nice. So I'll explain briefly. So he's the only leader option for Raptors, and he's still overcosted. Raptors got a points cut, which I'm going to mention later, and again, this guy's still too expensive. Brought him down to like 75 points. I think you might see him in casual games, but as for now, he's just pretty bad. I think you should be able to leave Warp Talons because it might not be thematic, obviously, because Raptors are a lot more organized than Warp Talons. Warp Talons tend to be like rabid dogs, where you just run them, you just throw them at something, and it tends to shred it. But I think him with Warp Talons, especially with the engagement range head taker ability and the Battle Shock aura, is really good. Although the Battle Shock aura for the Herald of the Apocalypse that he has, which is pretty solid when it comes to using it with Raptors, obviously, because they've got -1 on their auras for the fearsome aura, and they also get the battle shock test aura, which is good. Um, yeah, so if you can do quite a lot of mortals as well if you optimize it and build for it. So you get a unit of 10 Raptors. Roll 11 dice, obviously, because this guy's the 11th attached to the unit. Every 4-up's a mortal wound when you charge into something. Probably going to be better on Warp Talons though again because you know they'd get the innate twin link with their weapons with the -2 strength 5 -2 1 damage. He hits quite hard, like strength 5 -2 2 is actually not too bad, and it's precision, but I just don't like him. I know that sounds a bit petty, but he's outclassed by the Jump Pack Lord. What's probably going to come out and outclass him. Same with other stuff. I think it's just like I said, it's just a hunch, but it's not a high bar to beat because Harkin at the minute is, I've never seen him in any games ever, and that's casual or competitive. So, like I said here, sorry, Mr. World Claimer, but you're not doing it for me. So next up is the Hellbrute, a personal favorite of mine. I do like the Hellbrute. So he's 140 points, and he's now down to 130. Nice one, nice, just a good quality of life change. They do have a subpar defensive profile, obviously, because 2-up armor, no envo is going to get chewed through. But they're now more reasonably priced. So, yeah, nice one. This is exacerbated by the points decreases across the board for CSM as well. So, by default, they're in a much better place and they can fit into a few more lists now. Their ability, the Dark Ascension, is really good as well. So it means that you get the opposite effect of the Dark Pact on a 5-up included. So, for example, if you're running Undivided and you choose, I don't know, sustained hits, you get lethals in addition on a 5-up. But if you're running it with a Mark of Chaos for a God, so for example, I've used here Mark of Nurgle, if you roll a 5, you also get a lethal hit on a 5 as well. So if you, let's say, I don't know, you roll a I don't know. We'll use an example. So let's say I've got the Hellbrute Plasma Cannon here, and I roll. It's D3, so I roll a 3. I get 3 shots. Hitting on 3s, I roll a 3, a 5, and a 6. I'd get 2 extra shots, and a 2 extra shots would auto wound as well, which is fantastic. And that's on a Strength 8 -3 damage attack. It's so useful. Again, it's probably good to bring one of these and just experiment in like a casual game or even in like a full competitive environment. You can just bring these and just be like, right, I want to see if this works in a position where everyone's playing to win. But the problem is it suffers from the same weaknesses it suffered from before. Focused down with even rudimentary anti-tank fire is going to, deal a lot of damage. Even indirect fire, because again, 2 up armor save's not the best with no invul. So yeah, he's nasty in melee because the Hellbrute Hammer or the Fist is really good, and you can be brought with a twin las cannon or a plasma cannon, either one. It's just easy to chew through him quite reliably. I mean, even melters are wounding him on fours, and he's got AP -4 on the melter guns as well. So you're bringing him up to a 6 up armor save, which means that even like 2 melter guns, if they're all decent on the damage, are going to kill this guy. Alternatively, if you want to be an absolute chad, you can bring 3 of them and just put them across your army, and then just see what happens there for 390 points. But that's you didn't hear that from me. So losers are the Chosen. Again, this is 130 points for 5. Former staple of the most competitive CSM lists, and now slightly overcosted. So Chosen are still really strong. I don't think they're weak at all, but I do think it's pretty ridiculous how 5 Chosen cost the same as a Predator variant, which is pretty disgusting in my opinion. If I was to improve them, I would probably reduce the points cost to like 125 for 5. I do think they should be kept expensive because obviously the profile for advance and charge, advance and fall back, that kind of thing needs to be in check. I think they're not. I'm not asking to bring them back to 110 points because that would just quite frankly fucking ridiculous. But again, they are going to be outclassed by legionaries in my opinion. Now I think the legionaries are just better than these guys. You can still bring the Chaos Lord combo with them if you wanted. So you get your 10 Chosen, Chaos Lord, Undivided, run up board, just punch everything to death, basically. But the advance and charge, obviously, like I said before, is nice. Advance and fall back and can do actions. Hit hard in melee, and 3 wounds is a pain for 2 damage weaponry because it pretty much halves the damage. Despite the toughness 4, but I don't think you'll see these guys at all, simply due to the fact that there are other options available which are better, and they are outclassed by other units. Sorry, they're outclassed by other units, and they are too expensive. Cypher is the next winner, so he's now 90 points. He's sub 100 points. Originally, he was 105, so he's now a sub 100 point Vect, which is fantastic. The rule itself isn't as strong as other Vect-like abilities, which I have seen. It's still quite helpful because it basically means that you get +1 CP. You add +1 CP to any stratagem that your opponent likes to use. So, for example, Space Marines with Armor of Contempt, Orcs with Hard as Nails, CP reroll, Tank Shock, etc. Anything like that, you can make your opponent pay more. You bleed your opponent more for resources. Cypher is a utility lone operative. He's not really there to run in and kill people like other lone operatives. He's just there to stick on an objective somewhere, cover some ground, and basically just do fucking shenanigans from a mile away with Agent of Discord. Lone op rule's really nice on him, so you're paying 90 points for a model which you can't target unless you're within 12 inches on a backline, or to do objective actions or score secondary objectives. I think it's a pretty good deal. I'd say he's you probably might see him genuinely. I actually think he's worth it solely for the Agent of Discord ability. I might be overselling him, but I genuinely do think he is really, really good. 105 points were too expensive for him, which again didn't warrant it, but now he's actually reasonably well priced, so I do think you will see him in a few competitive lists. Very big stratagems that your opponent can get for free now cost 1 command point, and those that do cost a command point now cost 2. So your opponent's going to think twice before doing certain things, which allows them to play. It'll get in their head basically. They're going to think and try and play around that. And his shooting's actually not too bad. It's not the worst because pistol, assault, sustained hits 1, 6 attacks on 2, strength 4 -1 damage, and his plasma pistol has assault, pistol, and sustained hits 1, 3 shots, hitting on 2, strength 8 -3 2 damage. It's nice to have, and he has a 4 pinball. And he also gets the ability to shoot heretic. If someone shoots anytime a model is selected to shoot, enemy model is selected to shoot, if one or more of those attacks target a friendly Heretic Astartes unit within 3 inches of the model, after that unit has finished making its attacks, this model can shoot as if it were a shooting phase, but must only target that unit. This is a very weird ability, but again, if you're if you're in 12-inch range and this guy gets charged, for example, let's say he gets flanked and he gets charged by a unit. If he survives, he just shoots in combat because he's got assault and pistol, and just melts pretty much anything that's in combat with him. Another winner again is Raptors. Raptors have gone from 90 points for 5 to 85 points for 5. They're an exceptionally useful utility unit for catching your opponent off guard, so they can fit into holes and openings within your opponent's defense if they're open, and screen your opponent's deep strike or rapid ingress attempts in the mid board early on, or cover ground for secondary objectives like behind enemy lines and engage on all fronts. Again, the Raptors are always, useful. A lot of people, praise them for how versatile they are as a unit, which is nice. I do think that they're a slightly more expensive biker unit, but it offers different tools. So the 10 points more expensive, but they're not as durable because it's T4 3 up armor versus T5 3 up armor. But they're ever so slightly better in melee because obviously they get more models. They get 2 extra guys with chain swords. They do get a power fist as well if you want to run them that way. You can bring them with melter guns, but again, you can also bring the bikers with melter guns and plasma guns as well. They're also a lot easier to avoid screening with because of the fly keyword. So your opponent can't just put a shitty unit, a guardsman or cannon fodder in a choke point. So your bikers basically just get caught and no can happen to them. But these guys can deal with that. And they're actually quite good at skirmishing objectives. So, for example, if your opponent doesn't you realize that you have raptors, you drop them in, you skirmish the backline objective unit, and you kill pretty much off. It's even skirmishing it and dealing with it, even contesting that objective is always good because then you have the opportunity to hit them with the aura and the terrifying assault ability, which means that they might proc a battle shock test, which is nice. So a lot of backline units either have a 6 up or a 7 up. You're going to make them fail that battle shock test roughly because they need an 8 or higher on a 7 up leadership monster or a unit, and you basically just you force them off the objective that way. I do think you will see them more. You might see a squad of 2 for 2 5s, quite the number, but I do think that they are an exceptionally good unit, and you will see them a lot more. But they did benefit a lot from the changes, which is nice. Next up is the Winged Demon Prince. So the Winged Demon Prince is, well, he was originally brought for the intoxicating elixir, but I'll get onto that in a second. So he was 195 points. He is now 180. Just what we needed. Like this guy, he needed a points cut because he was way too expensive, but now he's reasonably priced. So the most common way to run him was originally with Marcus Lanesh. You get 14-inch movement, hitting hard with exploding fives in melee, advance and charge and shoot, or or fall back and charge. Advance to shoot to charge, or you can fall back and charge, and you get the 5 up feel no pain from the intoxicating elixir, which I recommended bringing. And it'll get you focused by your opponent 100% because this guy's scary. But there's a lot of layers of durability, especially with the 5 up feel no pain. So now, originally, he used to cost 210, but now he's 195 with the enhancement. So his previous points cost is now what he costs with the enhancement. So you basically get it for free. You are gonna want to bring the intoxicating elixir if you do bring this guy, and you get an enhancement for free basically, which is always nice. It's worth considering bringing him because the guy actually hits super hard because you've got, like I said, 14-inch movement, exploding fives in melee, advanced shoot and charge, or fall back and charge, and your 5 up feel no pain it's a pain in the ass for people to deal with. He's not It's a pain to deal with, and again, if you roll hot for your feel no pain, you will survive a lot more than you should do. But again, he's going to die if your opponent focus fires him, which again your opponent is going to do, given how scary the dude actually is. But I would recommend that your opponent needs to respect the threat range because that 14-inch move and advance and charge is nasty. So again, your opponent's going to screen hopefully well to deal with this guy, but if not, you're basically going to get into their turn at their board quite early on and just do a shitload of damage. Next up is Cultists. So the Chaos Cultists score a points deduction from 55 to 50, and they are still an auto-include unit. I still think they're an auto-include unit at 55 points, and they are more so now that they got a points cut. Again, they're just stupidly strong. I really, really like the unit. I think they're a fantastic utility unit. They're just very, very points efficient. The backline objective holders, which can do actions, screen, and you don't care if they die most of the time. You're paying 50 points for 10 bodies that can't shoot well, can't fight in melee, and die to a stiff breeze, but they'll score you a lot when it comes to secondary missions. And if you want to learn how to play these guys a quite well in my opinion. 'Cause obviously, I did the guide. You can view the guide, so it's the part 3 version that includes Chaos Cultist and Legionaries. I run through leadership options, how to play them, how to screen with them, little text you can do with them, anything like that. And these guys are pretty much an auto include unit. Cultist, I can't sing the praises enough. If you want me to go into more detail with them, please check part 3 out in the comprehensive guide list, which will be on the channel. So thank you for watching. Like I said, if please like and subscribe if you enjoyed something in the video or you learned something from it. Feel free to leave your opinion in the comment section below. I love discussing everything with you guys because you guys provide different perspectives, so I can get better and acknowledge things that I might have got wrong or things that I might have been right about. Constructive feedback is always appreciated too. So, like I said, anything that you think I've got wrong, please let me know. And please, wherever you are, have a great day, evening, or night. And remember to praise the dark gods. Thanks, guys.